Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the CIDCI Online Salon Series. I'm Margie O'Driscoll, and on behalf of the CIDCI Board of Directors, I'd like to welcome you here today. CIDCI's mission is to accelerate innovation, disruption, and change to improve the built environment. We create networks that share knowledge, experience, and ideas through productive dialogue. CIDCI is a profit organization that relies on your financial support to provide these programs. Thank you to our sponsors who make all of this possible. Throughout the United States, there's an emerging feeling of hope. As vaccination rates increase around the United States, a feeling of optimism is starting to emerge. Many of us are hugging elders we haven't seen for a year, or maybe planning a postponed wedding. Our lives are transforming into a new normal, an entry into a new time that is both simultaneously similar, yet very different than the world we left in February of 2020. As we re-enter workplaces, airports, and sports stadiums, we hope that some of the difficult lessons of the past year strengthen our resolve to build back better. At CIDCI, we're starting to plan our fall forum, which will be October 4 to 8. As much as we wish we could be with you in person for the day, we believe that it is more prudent to do an online series. So we'll do what we did last year, 5 days of 90-minute early morning salons. These salons will feature innovative ideas with groundbreaking presentations and are designed to be shared widely with your colleagues. If you see something you want to share with a client or friend, feel free to direct them to the CIDCI website to hear recordings of almost all of our events. Okay, here's a bit of information about how today's session will work. We're recording this presentation and we'll put it on the CIDCI website as soon as possible. If you have questions or comments during the presentation, please use the chat box. Today's session will run for 60 minutes. Today, two of America's most interesting construction innovation leaders, Dave Burns and Kaushal Diwan, will engage in a frank conversation about the opportunities and challenges of their work. Constantly faced with the questions of what solution to use and how to implement solutions to address business challenges, they will discuss the innovation framework of corporate organizations today and the challenges ahead. A bit about these speakers. Dave Burns provides leadership in the development of McCarthy's project lifecycle technology strategy. His team seeks to be a market leader in research, development, and scaling of value-added digital capabilities that bring measurable improvements to the business and its clients. Kaushal Diwan is the national leader of DPR's Corporate Innovation Group and is a member of the Technology and Innovation Leadership Team. Kaushal helps drive DPR's ever-forward culture by helping employees identify opportunities for improvement and convert their concepts to measurable results for projects and customers. Kaushal, are you going to get us started?
Hey, good morning, Margie. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the time today. Dave and I, we've kind of collaborated on this topic quite a bit, and an exciting topic for Dave and I, something that we have been, living and breathing for the past few years, and just putting our collective minds together, just to kind of share some thoughts with you guys, and hoping for some really good, engaging Q&A at the end of the presentation. So just to kind of, start things off, just a little bit about myself. Margie, thank you for the great intro. But my career started really in the Air Force. My first job professionally was in the Air Force. I had a few different positions, from aviation to contracting. My final few years, I spent some time with the Air Force Academy, trying to recruit the next leaders for the military. 15 years almost in construction, just about, hitting that 15-year mark closer to the end of the year. And even in construction, I spent some time jumping around between different roles, trying to understand what each role does for the industry. A lot of my time has been spent in virtual design and construction, and really, honing in on the passion for technology that I have. And my last 5 years, I've spent, leading the innovation group for DPR. I've also spent some time, teaching at Berkeley. I taught the VDC course at Berkeley through the as an adjunct faculty. A little bit about DPR. Company's, relatively young, founded in 1990, privately held, employee owned. But the core, focus of the company, we wanted to be collaborative, open office environment. Nobody has offices, We have a culture of discipline, and specialty and technically, challenging projects. We realized that there was something that, we're really good at. How do we focus on that and put a little more, fuel on that fire? How do we get better at it and continue to improve in that? And so, a lot of our focus on our projects, most of it has been very targeted. DPR just doesn't build any project. We focus on specific core areas. A little bit about our presence, as you can see, primarily in the United States, but we're starting to have some targeted international presence, in Europe, starting to expand some of our project reach in Southeast Asia. In terms of employees, roughly a 50-50 split there, around 3,300 craft employees and roughly about the same in terms of our full-time staff. Last year was challenging for a lot of us, and including DPR. We were fortunate enough to, secure at least $6 billion in revenue last year, and when it comes down to, some of our core markets, these are the 5 markets that we focus our energy on, advanced tech, data centers, healthcare, higher education, life sciences, supporting some of these facilities that build, the vaccines that are going out today. And then commercial offices, some of the corporate offices that you see, I'm gonna hand it off to Dave here.
Great. Hey, hi, morning, everybody. So Dave Burns here with McCarthy. I currently lead our project delivery and emerging technology teams within McCarthy. A little bit of background on myself. So grew up in Colorado, attended Colorado State, where I actually had a focus on computer information systems from the point I started university. So going through and entering into kind of the work world, definitely had a foundation in terms of leveraging technology, but more specifically understanding, business problems, business challenges, and how that technology applied to that. So I spent 4 years right out of school, focused on large kind of financial systems implementation. So I spent a stint at Oracle, and that was where I had my first introduction to construction, having the opportunity to implement more of the operational side of project financials within a couple construction companies. The last of which was McCarthy, where I decided to make the jump over to the construction side, where I've been for the last 14 plus years. So in that time, I've had the opportunity to gain a broader perspective and a deeper perspective on how operations, pre-construction, leverage our technologies, both from the standpoint of like kind of the foundational platforms, integrations, data, as well as kind of the what's next opportunities, which is kind of the emerging tech side of the world. So I sit in a relatively unique position in that I have the opportunity to kind of see what's on the horizon and understand what companies, including McCarthy, as well as DPR and others, are exploring, as well as understanding kind of the immediate needs and immediate challenges of the enterprise that desire, scalable solutions. So have a good lens on both of those and how the two kind of interact with each other. So you can go on forward. So as far as McCarthy, so we're a touch older than DPR, I think. 1864, been around a little while, just a little bit. 100% employee owned, which is a huge thing for us as a company, noting there the culture of ownership. So we've been, all employees are stockholders, and what it generates is a culture that not only is ownership, but entrepreneurial and really focused on overall success and partnerships within the organization. So we do a wide range of work, which I'll touch on here in a minute, but it's really about how do we deliver, exceptional employee experiences, exceptional client experiences in how we build and deliver work for our clients. So as far as, kind of the big picture, we're a national builder at the moment. We don't do anything international, hovering right around 5 billion in terms of revenue for 2020. You see kind of the count in terms of employees. generally speaking, that's split down the middle, give or take a little bit in terms of salaried as well as our self-performed craft workforce. And as mentioned before, kind of the 100% employee ownership. You can go one more. And then in terms of work mix, you know, we're pretty diversified. So healthcare is a big focus for us. Kaushal kind of hit on some of the areas that DPR focuses. I'd say we're very much in those same focus areas, in those same markets. So depending on the geography that you're in, you're going to see more emphasis in some of these different markets. But we have the ability and the desire to go and build in all of these markets, in all of these project types, and all the markets that we work within. So that's kind of the background on us and the background on the company. So companies. So let's kind of get into this. So want to kind of set the table a little bit in terms of, you know, we're going to talk a lot about like innovation and why innovation, how innovation. I think it's important to set some context in terms of like the industry as a whole and some factors that may be, we'll say, like high level drivers for what's going on. So, you know, Margie kind of kicked off talking a little bit about COVID, right? That's obviously been in focus and continues to be in focus for a lot of companies and a lot of industries globally, right? That combined with, you know, political, economic, technology, all of these factors really are resulting in the world speeding up quite a bit. And in the world speeding up quite a bit because of these factors, we're seeing not only more opportunities, but also a number more challenges as a planet, let's say. So I would say there's very few industries out there that are not needing to focus on innovation and responding both kind of tactically, but as well as strategically to all this change that is going on in the world. And construction is no you know, exception to that. So it's not only about how, you know, companies, you know, survive what's going on, but it's also how do they thrive, grow, differentiate, and excel within the space. So these are just one more comment on that, Kaushal. Those are just what's laid out here are hopefully for folks that are in the industry, none of this comes across as a surprise, right? In terms of factors that are contributing to why an organization needs to innovate and change. But these are the things that are definitely in focus for both Kaushal and I and other innovation partners that work within the CIDCI as well as some other groups. So you can go one more. So we'll with that being thought about, we're going to really just talk about this through the lens of kind of these corporate innovation groups. So there's a lot of different lenses you can look through this, but our subject matter expertise between Kaushal and I is definitely from that kind of corporate innovation lens. So the factors that we want to just quickly talk through, we'll talk a little bit about culture and philosophy. So this is kind of the context in which groups like ours operate within an organization, resources that we leverage or take advantage of, capabilities that we'll have, and as well as kind of a discussion about kind of the goals and targets of these innovation programs. All right, so as far as culture and philosophy, so as I mentioned, you know, the way in which groups, innovation initiatives or innovation teams within large organizations like DPR and McCarthy, how we operate is going to be hugely dependent on the environment in which we're working, right? So, and that's not just the company, but it's the market that the company sits within, right? So for the construction space as an example, like market stability, you know, depending on what market we're talking about, and the construction market is not just one big market, right? The desire or the need to accelerate, differentiate amongst competitors is going to be different, right? So that's a big factor. Business strategy, how that business strategy lays out maybe near-term focus areas as well as long-term vision and focus areas is a big factor. Leadership support is huge. So when it comes to innovation and driving change, if you don't have the support of your leadership, your executive leadership, that can present a challenge or a huge, pedestal and accelerator for innovation. The brand recognition piece is a big deal. So recognizing what role does innovation play in presenting your brand to your clients is a big factor that's going to drive how far and how fast you go. And then the mindsets and behaviors of the organization. So how willing and accepting are people to like jump in and try new and different things and think creatively. So from a focus area standpoint, there's a lot of discussion about like, is innovation technology or is innovation something more broadly? So depending on the organization, you're going to see, a heavier focus in one or the other. I think generally speaking, everybody's trying to move in the direction of it's not about technology, it's about kind of the problems we're solving, whether it's tech or not. The kind of incremental versus disruptive, internal processes versus the products and services that we focus on, and then just really who's responsible and owns innovation within an organization. So is it going to be a centralized group that's doing that, or are we trying to spread the love and really push out that innovative capabilities and innovative problem solving to the broader organization? Kaushal, anything you want to add to this one?
I think the only thing I'll add, it's the core focus piece, right? It's really important to have, that focus, only because there's so many attractive tools and technologies out there that you can really go down, a rabbit hole without realizing, okay, how is this really benefiting, the firm, or how is it benefiting our projects and customers? So the core focus piece is very important, and then tying that back to, sort of the business piece that you talked about, Dave. Sorry.
Yep. So as far as this is a framework that McCarthy has leveraged specifically on the emerging technology side. It's an example that just kind of outlines, and I think when Kaushal and I were talking, we noted a number of similarities in kind of the framework or the construct for how we think about this. So kind of the upper side of this notes kind of the inputs for innovation opportunities. So again, on the top and to the right three there, technology trends, industry trends, and business strategy, tend to represent what are those strategic targets for innovation. And then the item on the left, the incremental business needs and opportunities, those don't go away, and nor should they, right? So you got a lot of folks on the ground facing unique and new challenges, and so recognizing and enabling kind of the idea generation and the raising of the unique problems is critical from kind of an incremental tactical innovation standpoint as well. So all that kind of feeding through, opportunities, priorities for an organization, for a team that focuses on this. And then from a capabilities standpoint, where does a group plug in, right? So if you're tightly centralized, then maybe you try and do all of this. If you're promoting kind of a more democratized approach, then you might see an opportunity and say, hey, we're going to support that team in a pilot evaluation, like help them understand how to plan and execute, but they're running it, right? So these are just some of the capabilities. We'll talk a little bit more about capabilities. Kaushal will here in a second, but this is just kind of framework to kind of get your mind going around like how these ideas and capabilities kind of flow as far as innovation within a corporate innovation program.
I think the only thing I'll add here, the communication piece, as you see at the bottom, that's probably one of the most important things, right? If an organization doesn't hear about, hey, what's happening, with this research, or what are we doing with this pilot, and you kind of go silent for a long time, it almost makes it seem like nothing's happening. So to have that communication, to say, hey, this is what we learned from this effort, this is what we learn from this pilot, and here's how we're potentially scaling it or not, I think that communication and awareness piece is very important. So going into, this, hang on a second, Mike. There you go, capabilities. All right, so what are we talking about when it comes to capabilities? We put a lot of thought around this slide. On the left, we said, okay, investment could be a lot of things. Could be investment in money, investment in, time and effort, risk at the same time. It could be, hey, what kind of risks are we taking on by exposing ourselves to taking something on, right? same time, at the bottom, how much time does it take, to really see something, go through fruition? What's the level of effort required? If you're taking a significant risk, is there a significant return? So what's that risk reward, look like? And so we kind of put some of this together. Thought leadership in marketing. This is something where you're outwardly communicating, or even internally, and talking about what are the value, what's the benefit of, having a thinking organization, something that an organization where employees are empowered to try new things and test new things. You go the next level up, the thinking organization, now you're making them curious. You're getting them excited to go out there, scout new technologies. You're looking at exploring new technologies and trying things on your job sites. And as Dave mentioned, it doesn't have to be all tools. It could be processes. It could be an improvement on a process that maybe is not as efficient. Further down you go, this is where, when you start talking about pilots, proof of concepts, now you're talking about changing something that's existing, right? You've identified a problem that potentially, has a better solution. And sometimes that even requires, some level of investment and maybe some time to see this problem through and this proof of concept through. So as you get further down the line, you'll notice that, we're adding bigger ticket items here to say, okay, this might take a little longer, but there's a higher risk and there's a higher reward that comes along with it. Research and development. You go, to our partners, in Japan, you go further, to that area, of the content of the world, you realize that it's not uncommon for a construction company to have, dedicated research departments, research and development groups with, 50 plus PhDs. And all they do is focus on how to improve, a specific construction process. And this requires a level of investment, and it's basically focusing on internal improvement. I'll click through these next few really quickly. Innovation labs, what are we talking about here? So think about it as, a makerspace. Think about it as, sort of a spot for, your teams that's dedicated to, go out there and tinker, try new things, invent, develop new things. And the last two almost kind of go hand in hand. Venture investment. There is a opportunity to partner with some of these startups, not only, strategic partnerships, but also sometimes financial, right? Some of these startups, they scale very quickly, their valuations grow, and then they get, acquired. And that's a very, that's a big exit for some of these VCs. And sometimes, companies even say, hey, let's, build some of this internally. Maybe, we have an idea, we want to incubate these, this startup as a spin out from our firm, and, we'll put them through an accelerator. So a lot of these things, as you can, tell, it just takes more time, more effort. If you go down to the path of VCs and incubators, there's a high return, but there's also a high risk, right? You may spend a lot of money, but may not see all of it back. Dave, any thoughts here?
No, I think the only thing that it might have come up on previous discussions, like the venture investment thing, similar to other kind of financial investment opportunities, can be structured with varying degrees of risk. So I think we placed this on here where we did, speaking probably most specifically to like investing in a very specific startup, and the due diligence as well as the investment that it takes and the risk associated with that. I would acknowledge like there are other investment opportunities, like venture investment opportunities within construction tech that are a little bit more hands-off in terms of like contributing to funds of some of the professional VC firms that are out there focused in our space. So just acknowledging there is a little bit of difference there, but that's just qualifying that specific item.
The other piece that's very important and clear for us is that you have to have a pipeline. You have to have a process that is very clear and easy to understand. And what's interesting is that, so Dave and I, we compared our notes on, hey, what does our process look like? It was almost like a one-to-one match. And if you step back and think about it, it's okay, well, it's got to be simple. It's got to be easy to understand. So, if you were to break it down, what problem are you trying to solve? method or process are you going to go about trying to solve that problem? But then, did you learn anything from it? And, what is the next step? Do we scale it? Do we kill it, right? All those things, they're pretty, common sense to some degree, but, we tend to overcomplicate things, and so, focusing on trying to simplify a process, easy to understand, it's very important to have, an innovation program. And so if I go through this pretty quickly, there's an opportunity pipeline, right? If you take the business context, if you take, what are the focus areas, for your firm, it'll narrow down sort of that field of solutions and strategies that you want to, tackle. Then you want to prioritize. You want to say, okay, what's important for our business right now? Maybe this is an opportunity that we pursue next year because we're not ready for it. Trying to go through that prioritization. Involve people, include, advisory groups. For DPR, we, each of our business units, we have core groups. These are volunteer folks that, that have day jobs, as PMs or superintendents and PEs, and they provide, feedback. Hey, we're thinking about testing this solution against this known problem. What are your thoughts? And from their feedback, we're able to evaluate what pilots do we take on. And then once we do a pilot, step 5, probably the most important step in this whole pyramid is, do we scale it or do we kill it? A challenge for DPR in the past was we have these pilots that just kind of linger on, right? A perpetual pilot. And so until you go through this and decide on which direction you want to go, you're going to continue to have a pipeline that's just kind of spinning. So it's very important to kind of go through these steps. The other piece that's really important, you got to have a criteria for evaluation. So if you go back here and steps 2 and 3 and 4, how are you evaluating? How are you making sure that you're objectively reviewing each opportunity that's coming across your plate, right? Commercial availability. This is, a question that we ask everybody that wants to pursue a pilot. It is the idea that you're trying to pursue. Is it readily available? Can I just go and buy it instead of trying to invent it and, reinvent it? Is there strategic alignment with our business needs? Is the idea unique? Is it something, that we're just buying off the shelf and applying it, or is it something that we're testing in a different way that has never been done before? Is there an existing idea or initiative that's already happening on the other side of the country that you can participate in instead of doing the same idea, that somebody else is already pursuing? So these are some of the, evaluation criteria that we ask our teams to think about and truly say, is this opportunity that we're about to engage in, is it accountable for the business, right? Any thoughts here, Dave? I think you've played around with this quite a bit too.
Yeah, what's going through my head, I think there's this like delicate balance between empowering and enabling people to think creatively and do innovative things and influencing them towards a process like this. You said it, Kaushal, like there is a good chance that someone who brings forward a problem, someone has previously brought forward that problem and we've talked about it or vetted it or connected people or whatever. So I think there's a natural tendency for individuals who want to be innovative to just say, like, I know my problem, I see an opportunity, just let me go. And you have to, there's some trusting partnership stuff that you got to do in order to influence those individuals to like broaden their perspective to say, hey, like, would it be beneficial for this to be integrated with this? This idea has been vetted, didn't go so well. Are you sure you want to do that? So that's something that really requires time and kind of the trusting partnership development stuff in order for this to be effective.
The other, part when you kind of, put all these things together, once you identify, the business context and focus areas for your firm, once you understand what risks and, capabilities you really want to pursue and what's the appetite, for that for your firm, you got to start thinking about, okay, what are the resources that are going to be required to really have, allow me to deliver on these commitments. Very, funding. How are we going to pay for this? A lot of this stuff, it's not free, right? And so, what is your process on on funding an idea. This is sort of where your pipeline and your criteria for evaluation comes into play big time, because you want to make sure that, you're not just paying for stuff, that you're buying gadgets for the firm, right? You want to make sure you're taking on true, efforts that will help improve, broken processes and challenges, and help improve challenges for the firm. Processes and tools, this boils down to really, how are you going to manage this information, right? What are the tools that you're going to use to manage your innovation program? There are a lot of, tools out there that allow you to sort of track innovation, efforts and put all that in one spot, and then allow you to, create BI reports where it's easily digestible for a larger audience. Some of these efforts do require dedicated teams, and folks that sit on overhead, folks that sit on a corporate team and support a project team. There could be a balance there. Sometimes, the person could sit on a project and support a project in a more dedicated fashion. So there's a good, need to understand basically what does it take to deliver on a capability, and how does it align with sort of the team needs and the project needs, and then determine if that's a dedicated team member and what's required there. Research and development. There's a huge opportunity to partner with universities, that are focusing on some of these, challenges and problem areas for the industry. So partnership, research, development, a lot of those kind of go together. When we put partnerships here, this is really talking about an opportunity to partner with other companies. The last couple of years have really been eye-opening. I think for us, for last year actually was probably the biggest, year for innovation in my mind. One example I can give you, we once COVID hit last year, a lot of our firms got together, DPR, McCarthy, Black and Veatch, Haskell, Swinnerton, and we realized, like, hey, there's a challenge out here with COVID that we need to put our heads together and solve this together. And the solutions that are out there, we all could use. Our employees can use, our staff, our craft to be safe. And last year, the companies got together and we put our competition aside, and we created a partnership, a coalition to funnel some of these tools, so we can get to the best solution that we can then deploy on our projects. So partnerships is very important. This does require us to, sort of pull down some barriers and join hands. Any thoughts, Dave?
No, just doubling down on the partnerships. It's like years ago, it was like, the work of anybody focused in construction tech was like, okay, you've got like the one or two companies out there, or however many, very few. And it was about contract negotiations and like, show us your product, and like, you're going to make decisions face value based on that. And now, VC engagement, the peer-to-peer stuff that we have going, as you mentioned, next. And just like even the partnerships with the startups is like, you got to be like willing and accepting of the idea that some of these solutions aren't fully cooked, and that's the opportunity, and that's a partnership opportunity. So the mindset has shifted in terms of like, you don't just go and say, well, show me your licensing model, right, and your legal terms. It's like, yes, we got to do that, but it's more about like, okay, do we have an aligned desire to solve some problem? And if so, how do we partner even more closely together? Because our success is that company's success more broadly, oftentimes. So as far as innovation targets go, so this is something we talk a lot about. And Andrew in the chat had asked a question about this, so it was a good one in terms of like, where do you focus, right? So this is one way in which to kind of represent or think about, areas of focus. So there was a slide earlier, the big graphic slide that had like business strategy, technology trends, industry trends. So those are factors, right? Like you have to have a good sense as to like what's happening there. And you need to have those good partnerships internally, right, with like your business leaders to say like, hey, where are we going, right? So, but what we talk a lot about within our kind of innovation team is balance. And and so I'll highlight some examples here. So like you've got kind of this today's needs, operational excellence, process efficiency, and effectiveness. So like a large percentage of the opportunities kind of sit down in that lower left box, which is good until you get like you get the business development call that says, hey, what are we doing that's innovative, differentiating? How can we present new and different value propositions to our clients? And if you have like nothing going on there and you have no focus or strategy around that, that's a problem, right? So, and the same could be said in terms of like if you're 100% focused on like what somebody's raising their hand and screaming or yelling or kind of saying, hey, let's sort of fix this, versus really thinking a few steps forward and putting some focus and time and investment into what is those next opportunities, whether it's new ways of working from an internal process standpoint, or what are our clients starting to ask about, or if we go like kind of challenge or sell on them, what are those value propositions that we're kind of seeking to better understand and then turn around and deliver solutions for. So it's not the exact answer, Andrew, but it hopefully it's like kind of a framework for you to say, like, if you want to be not balanced, you can just kind of put yourself in any one of these quadrants and say, that's where I'm going to focus, right? But at least for McCarthy, we're trying to think about, all levels. So Kaushal, anything from a target standpoint at DPR?
We, when it came down to determining what areas did we want to focus on, we looked at a broad stroke. And I think, one of the slides here sort of covered what are the areas that we started with. We had core business needs. We looked at technology trends. We looked at, where is the market going? And then we looked at that and we said, okay, well, what are some of our technology priorities and strategies? If I put those two together, those things together, that's kind of how we determine focus areas for innovation, right? We said, there are things that are opportunities for IoT, there's opportunities for robotics, and each of these are focus areas. Some have more focus than others. And, Andrew, to your point, you really have to determine going back, what's that business context, right? What's that appetite, to take some of these things on, because it does require, time, effort, and even some cash in some degree. And so, this is a great slide. Dave, it talks about sort of where does that opportunity fall? And I think it'll sort of point you in the direction of the level of effort and investment required.
All right, we'll go rapid fire through these last couple. So, okay. So in terms of kind of what's working or successes that are out there, we already talked about partnerships. So CIDCI is a big one. Like, Margie had kind of initiated. Kaushal was big on like, hey, let's bring a group together and start talking about this. We've been doing it, gosh, maybe 2-3 years now. And it's been really cool to bring not only just like construction perspective, but designer perspective. We've got Canadian representation. Like it's really, it's cool to see that group come together, and you've got big fish and kind of medium to smaller fish in there. So it's interesting to kind of hear the different dynamics in terms of what people are focused on. Corporate VC collaboration, that was another one that is really interesting more recently. Like there's a lot of mutual targets or benefits that venture capital and like folks like us have, right? Like we both want certain things to be successful, right? So it's interesting the way in which we start to exchange notes and collaborate on that end. Definitely growing focus and investment. Kaushal called this out when we were putting this deck together, that this is folks like our teams are becoming more common in terms of like dedicated resources. And then definitely, I don't have the stats, Kaushal probably does, but in terms of like technology investment in our industry, it's up and to the right. And it's likely to continue to be that way. I think the venture capital space definitely sees the productivity challenges, the labor challenges, the acceleration of infrastructure needs as being like a hotbed for investment in this space. And then as an outcome to that is the ample opportunities. There are, a week doesn't go by, sometimes a day doesn't go by when I'm not being told or introduced to something that I felt I should have known the day before. But those things are coming up fast and furious for us.
I will touch on the ample opportunity piece here. Just a quick metric. I think Crunchbase reported something like, 3 billion in investments, in venture investments in 2019. I think it was like 2 billion in 2020. And if you look at that, that's a lot of opportunity, right? There's a lot of external investment in startups and new technologies. And this is probably why we're getting all these phone calls and emails, Dave. It's an opportunity for us to dive in and help improve the industry. With successes, there are also some challenges, right? And so, kind of touching on what are some of those challenges. So not only do those opportunities exist, but sometimes it even creates some noise. I think Andrew, you mentioned this in the chat. How do you sift through all this? I think it really, once you understand what are some of the, the focuses, it kind of narrows down, the amount of noise you got to sift through. But at the end of the day, it's still a challenge, right? I think for DPR, it's somewhere between 30 to 40, inquiries that we get on a quarterly basis. And the team has to kind of get through that and say, hey, okay, out of these 30 and 40, firms, who has something that we really need, that can help solve a problem. And sometimes it's just something that's cool and we may, we're not ready for it. So trying to have that quick filter is a good idea to have. And sometimes, it's also a challenge, which innovation without a process and a strategy is a challenge. We mentioned having a pipeline, having a process to kind of evaluate and vet ideas, having a process that says, is something accountable or not? It's very important. If you don't have that, kind of shooting in the dark, right? You kind of got this wide open space and you're chasing a lot of things without really, understanding if it's improving, your business or not. Interoperability and data fragmentation. This has been a challenge, probably 10 years ago when we had VDC and we're trying to figure out, how different models can interact. And some of that still exists today. Data fragmentation is a challenge for the industry. And I think if we can figure that out, we can really start leveraging technologies like AI and IoT. This last one, scaling disruptive solutions. What are we saying here? So there have been instances where we find a tool that's so cutting edge and so great that we'd love to just deploy it across the organization, right? And just kind of have it be part of our standard, a standard best practice tool. The challenge with that sometimes is, our processes are sometimes broken. So it takes a long time to scale something. On the flip side, sometimes the solution is not ready to be scaled. We've also faced a challenge where we try to scale something too quickly, but the startup, the solution provider had a hard time keeping up with the volumes of data that was coming their way, from a large company like DPR or McCarthy. And so some of these are just, sort of high level challenges that we've seen and faced as along with our process and our journey. Any other final thoughts, Dave?
The interoperability one, I think, the breakthrough innovation for our industry is going to come through like vertical supply chain type solutions. And I think there's the data fragmentation, but there's just the overall like market fragmentation. So I think what will be interesting is like from a business leadership standpoint, as these technologies continue to evolve and things like prefabrication and offsite production become more real. They're already real, but as they continue to accelerate, like I think we're going to have to get to a point where like the fragmentation and the like, hey, we need to spread the love and we need to obviously qualifications and all that is very, very important. But eventually I feel like we're going to have to get to a point where there's going to have to be some like trusted partnerships that form. And we've talked about this in some of our innovation groups, like some trusted partnerships that allow us to extend like the vertical technology integration in ways that maybe like manufacturing or other industries have done this in order to like maximize that. And until that kind of business model, business mindset type thinking changes, obviously some folks have gone and tried to do like full vertical efforts, but those are challenging, right? Especially at the scale that DPR and McCarthy work. So anyways, that's just the interoperability. Yes, from a technology standpoint, but also yes, from like a market fragmentation standpoint.
that's all we have for you guys today. Thank you for your time. If you want to reach us, there are emails there and our links to our LinkedIn accounts. I'm sure you can probably find our accounts very easily. But I'll stop sharing my screen here. Open it up for any Q&A.
If you have questions, you can put them in the chat box. Do you want to pull any questions out right now, Dave or Kaushal, from the chat box? I know that it's been filling up there with questions.
We can kind of start. Andrew put some in here, so I think we could kind of start at the top. He mentioned kind of the if we go all the way up, we've got kind of the driving the pipeline. So I think just a couple thoughts there. We already talked about kind of the framework and the quadrants, but at least for us, and I'm sure Kaushal does the same, is like engaging business leaders that have a focus on kind of big picture targets from a business standpoint. So we have like a 5-year vision and areas of focus there, and there's leaders of each of those specific initiatives. So sitting down with them, because they represent kind of the 5-year, here's where we want to get to as a business. So I think that's like pretty key, as well as at least for us, we continue to diversify in terms of like our specialty market focus. We would refer to it as, so this is, our solar business, our water wastewater business. And so those guys bring very unique challenges. And so those are a couple other like leadership groups that we need to go to and say like, hey, what are the unique problems that you guys are facing that may look a little different than the last, decade or two of like general contractor problems that we've been staring at, so those are a couple thoughts.
Got another question here. It talks about how many team members work with you and your team. I think, for us, it started out with a group of, 3 or 4 folks, at a corporate level, and we've kind of stayed there, but we're looking at expanding our team, as we add some focus areas. For example, we increased the focus around robotics because that technology has really taken off, and there's some, real value there to help us, be efficient as self-performing, GCs, but it also helps us address, the challenges that we have, with the labor shortage. This is something that the Japanese construction firms have really taken on and gone all in on. And so there's some lessons to be learned there, but that also means that we have to have a dedicated focus. So when it comes down to the teams, and I'll tie that into the next question here, by Mr. Nguyen about how executives interact with innovation groups. What else do we have here? Is direction leadership coming from executive level? I think, for DPR, it's been a focus around how do we create an environment that allows our employees to experiment? How do we create a group that supports these employees? How do we, figure out a way to, even if an employee has an idea that they want to pursue, how do we help them break that down, to actually pursue the idea, but then also make sure that we're being accountable, to the firm and that we're not chasing just, shiny objects. That process requires, feedback from everybody, not just the executives, not just, the group. It also requires feedback from the boots on the ground level, people that are actually going to be doing these ideas. And so it took us a little while. It took us about, I want to say almost a year, not only getting out there, but listening to the folks, understanding what problems that they're facing, and sometimes, it's not a technology problem, so you have to look at the people, then you have to look at the existing processes, and then you have to say, how do these tools fit in? I think, Dave, you had a similar process. I'll let you any thoughts on that question?
No, I think you hit it. We're pretty similar in that regard. I don't think I have as much to add on that one. I'm just kind of going through. This is great. This is a lot of questions. I'm like, I'm trying to keep track of them. I'm just going to kind of keep.
For you, would it be easier if I just pulled out the questions?
Yeah, Margie, that would be helpful.
Yeah, go for it, Margie.
Okay, great. Let's see. There's a question here from Brooke. Can you talk about the process of creating your innovation process? This is sort of going back to the beginning for each of you. Who are key stakeholders? How long did it take to develop?
Kaushal, do you want to go first on that one?
Would you each take that one?
Yeah, I touched on it a little bit. It took us about a year. Stakeholders included project teams, included, our executive leadership, included leaders from our technology and innovation group as well. And so it was basically a broad stroke, right? Getting feedback from everybody. But it also took, the innovation team getting out there and visiting job sites to understand what's really happening right out there, because we wanted to make sure the process wasn't disconnected from what was actually needed. So it was about a year for us, but it included various levels of leadership.
Yeah, McCarthy, it's evolved in an exciting way. I think initially the company was doing creative, innovative, entrepreneurial things for a while. I wouldn't say, they were all kind of happening in pockets. So there wasn't like a formal innovation program of sorts. So I'd say about 3 years ago, there was an innovation team kind of born out of the technology group. And that was what I was involved in. We started to see some successes, energy definitely developing around innovation. More recently, it's broadened itself to be a strategic focus for the entire organization, which is really, really cool to see. So it's broadened. So that the first piece of it probably took about a year and a half, 2 years to really kind of accelerate to where it is from a technology standpoint. And now we're about a year into kind of the broader strategic focus, which technology is an element of, but there's kind of the whole culture and mindset and those elements as well. And so that we're probably, formal innovation program, we're all in probably three to 4 years in on that. And it's still evolving and developing, which is neat to see.
That's great. Really quickly, how large are your respective dedication innovation groups? That's from Todd Mercer.
So I'll say from the McCarthy side, we've got a few different pieces, as I mentioned before. So we have kind of a dedicated strategic initiative group, which has kind of a sub-element that's focused on our prefab and offsite production as well. So I think that group in total is probably 5 or 6 folks. And then the the emerging tech side is currently 3 folks.
So for DPR, we're currently at 5 people, including myself, and there's a plan to scale to about 7 in the next year or so.
I'm going to ask a question, not in the chat box, but because I know some of the people who are on the call, and I know that they are thinking about setting up an innovation sort of program in their firms. What advice would you have for them about how best to do this? Now, knowing that some of these people are very senior and other people are, in a less senior role, but seeing the need and having the desire to actually do that within their firms, what advice would you give both of those kinds of people?
I'll throw us a couple thoughts out there. So I think the executive leadership support is like the number one thing that comes to mind, right? Like don't do this without someone at the very top that says, yeah, this is important and I support it. And that there's a difference maybe between like supporting and like openly promoting and all that. As long as you can start with some support, you can grow to the whole like rah, but you need somebody who at least is kind of saying, okay, I'm going to invest in this. I'm going to support it. I'm going to have these guys' backs as they get this thing going. The other thing is like kind of define your why is important. So I think we talked about it earlier is like, if it's about being just some, flashy front end innovation shop, that's a why, is that the right why? I don't know, but that's a why. So you got to talk out like, why are we standing this program up? So that you like have a good messaging and good focus, and you're thinking about hiring the people that support that why and all that. So I think those are just a couple that come to mind for me.
For us, this program has evolved quite a bit. In the early 90s, when the company was very young, we had a paper-based process. We called it the O5 program, Opportunities for Improvement. And it was it was basically a note card. People had the opportunity to see that they noted a problem and then submit a solution for it. And then in 2011, we formalized it, so the innovation group for us has been around since 2011. And the focus there was, how do you scale what we had with paper-based process, but then, focus, put a group behind it and support it. And so, leadership support is very important. And, it has to be at all levels, not just the president. It has to be at the middle managers, the executive level, project managers down to the PE. And they all have to be sort of feeling and saying and thinking the same thing, right, for it to be really successful. And I know Albert Einstein had a really good quote, that says, what is, and Dave touched on this, like, what is your why? Why are you doing this? And what problem are you trying to solve? And even there, if you have an hour, spend 55 minutes trying to investigate what the problem is, and then maybe spend 5 minutes on the solution. And so to me, innovation can help in a lot of different areas. We tend to put it in this technology, bucket a lot, but it's bigger than technology. It's focused around people, it's focused around process, and then tools is part of that. And so understand what that big picture looks like, understand what's the business context, and what's the appetite, for the firm to sort of take some of these risks on. I think that'll be a good innovation program in my mind.
Great. We have a question here from Jay Love. At the firm strategic level, does your company dedicate a line item budget amount or percent of revenue or earnings for innovation initiatives, or is the authorization ad hoc as opportunities are defined or identified?
Yep.
Sorry.
So I'll talk quickly on it. It's kind of a mix, I would say. So we've got a dedicated fund. We also have we have some business groups, so like some business unit groups that position like innovation funding or innovation dollars kind of within the business unit, or they're intentional in terms of targeting innovation money even at a project budget level. So and then we also have hey, this is a really good idea and the timing is important and we need some support and buy-in for this. And so those situations do come up, and we have kind of a governance is maybe a inappropriate word for innovation, but it's kind of a governance structure that allows for kind of higher level folks to take a look at those bigger opportunities and make the decisions on those investments, maybe independent of whatever the annual budget says is available.
For us, it's kind of, gone up and down, and we've looked at, compared our budget to strategies and what it takes to deliver on those strategies. So some years our budget was, higher than others. We didn't really start dedicating, true funds to this until we started the group in 2011. I think, so that's about 10 years, where we spent about $12 million in those 10 years, everything from, and that 12 million includes everything from, the team that's dedicated and paying for the team to do their jobs, but also the ideas that they were supporting. And so, it's just sort of looking at what is that, going back to what's that appetite for the firm, right? What is it that you're trying to solve? What is it that you're trying to fix? And, and kind of go from there. And it'll tell you, how much money you need to have.
Kaushal and Dave, we're heading to our last minute. I just want to give you the opportunity to add any last words.
No, I don't. Hopefully this was informative. I think it's funny how like Kaushal and I have had conversations like this, and I think each time I've been involved in one of these, I knew kind of insights, something that Kaushal says, a question somebody asked actually kind of raises something up in my head. So this was as informative for me as hopefully it was for everyone else. So thank you.
Same here. I love these conversations. I think knowledge sharing is very important. So each time we get together to put one of these together, we learn a lot from each other, and so I hope this was as informative, like Dave said, for you as it was for us. And please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to share, anything that you want to learn about our process, how we go about breaking down some of these, technologies, and, I'm happy to share.
Yeah, thanks, Margie, for the opportunity.
Dave and Kaushal, thank you so much. I have so much fun working with the both of you. Every time I talk with both of you, especially together, I feel like my mind is expanded, and I think that everybody on the call must feel like that as well. So I can't thank you enough, and for all the work and support that you've done for CIDCI. It's just so wonderful to work with you guys, both of you. So sadly, this concludes CIDCI's online salon. The session, as I said earlier, will be recorded and placed on the CIDCI website as soon as possible. To join us for future webinars, please subscribe to our newsletter on our website, cidci.org. Our next salon will be on May 13th and features Danish professor Christian Tausen discussing designing construction in the circular economy. What can Denmark teach the US about a more holistic approach to innovation? Special thanks to Monica Whistler for keeping us on track, and especially to Kaushal and Dave for their work and for their inspiration, and frankly, they're very transparent revealing of their programs, which really helps the field as a whole. Thanks to everyone for joining us. And as always, if you have thoughts or comments, please reach us on the website. Thank you all so much. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.